All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Cuomo together again. A lot of postmortems about this kid Zohran, this upstart, this game changer. I mean, questions abound over the future of the whole Democratic Party and what this victory portends for the midterms and beyond. Zohran's victory in New York City was part of a wider Democratic run of high-profile elections in Virginia and New Jersey, the California redistricting initiative, and several state and municipal elections. The headlines were mostly Mamdani, and that's M-A-M-D-A-N-I. So let's talk about him. Let's talk about what his victory means and what it doesn't. And let's talk about what comes next. UNFTR. $40 million. That's how much the anti-Mamdani super PAC Fix the City raised from individuals with generational wealth. And the money came from far and wide: Las Vegas, Nevada, Arkansas, the suburbs, and yes, from New York City. And as Mamdani noted, these people gave more in donations to defeat him than he's even proposing to tax them. And it wasn't enough. In fact, it might have detracted from Cuomo's efforts to appeal to everyday New Yorkers. Zohran Mamdani showed that another way is possible through sheer determination and focused messaging. He was everywhere, in every borough. There he is in a bodega, spotted in a nightclub, on the morning television shows, hanging out on a podcast. Mamdani's relentless pace was unmatched by any campaign in recent memory. Even Bernie Sanders would have needed a nap at some point. So many of you know that we interviewed Zohran in April, and yes, that's a flex. Also, it's probably never going to happen again, and that's okay, because Zohran Mamdani belongs to the world now. But we followed him really closely. I mean, paid attention assiduously to his campaign every single day for months, and even still, I was blown away on election night with his opening statement that hit me like a ton of bricks.
The sun may have set over our city this evening, but as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity.
A modern-day politician with the eyes of the world on him, choosing to open with a quote from Eugene Debs. I'll remember that forever. Bernie Sanders quotes him all the time, but this felt different. So Eugene Debs set out from Chicago on August 31st, 1908, on a train dubbed the Red Special to promote his socialist candidacy for president. The train traversed the country for 64 straight days, stopping several times a day for Debs to address adoring crowds that gathered at the train stop. And on the final day, he spoke 7 times before rolling back into his hometown of Terre Haute, Indiana. It was the third of 5 presidential campaigns, and it's estimated that on this one, he shook nearly 250,000 hands during the trip. This was prior to the Bolshevik Revolution. It was in the throes of the Second Industrial Revolution, before World War I. It was the waning days of the Ottoman Empire, the height of British imperialism, a time when socialism was seen as a viable movement and not a 4-letter word. And Eugene Debs was its reluctant hero, the face of a movement that captured the imagination of the working class, and it terrified the industrialists and the bankers of the day. And more than a century later, and the term socialism is still terrifying the elite. Only this time it's financiers and tech bros instead of industrialists. The bankers, they're all the same. So the idea that a young Muslim immigrant captured the imagination of working class people everywhere and might be the one to revitalize and rehabilitate fundamental socialist concepts should be celebrated as the most American thing ever. Social media was his red special. It took him through every borough and us along with him. And we rode this virtual train alongside Zohran, and suddenly he did belong to all of us. Now, campaigns have already tried to mirror his style and capture his energy, but they all miss what elevated him beyond the ubiquity and the sloganeering. A democratic socialist message. Free public transportation, affordable housing, free universal childcare, Zohran the capitalist wouldn't have captured the zeitgeist. Zohran the democratic socialist became the zeitgeist. And this is the lesson that many of us fear the Democratic Party will ignore. They'll focus on his smile and his charm. They'll marvel over his social media prowess and message discipline without examining the message itself. There's only one Bernie Sanders, just as there was only one Eugene Debs. Now, that's largely because the establishment failed to meet the moment and coalesce around them. In fact, it worked against them. So in this moment, we would be wise to view Debs not just as an inspiration, but a cautionary tale. You see, it wasn't the millionaires and the industrialists who sidelined his movement. It wasn't even the establishment figures who went so far as to throw him in jail during his final bid for the presidency. It was the unions. The unions that he bled for every day of his adult life. The unions who sided with the forces of capitalism, choosing incrementalism and the scraps from the capitalist tables, who split apart the working class and helped turn workers away from the burgeoning Socialist Party, in the same way that the Democratic Party apparatus used all of its might and all of its resources to beat back the advances of the Sanders campaigns twice. What makes Zohran special is that he beat the establishment twice. He tore the heart out of it in the primaries, and he did it again on Election Day. He beat the billionaires at their own game by raising small dollar donations and reaching the matching threshold. And he beat the establishment Democrats at their own game by refusing to beg for their endorsements, instead wearing the lack of them as a badge of honor. Would Zohran play in rural areas and red states? You bet he would. Because he carries with him the anti-establishment populist message that made Bernie and Trump so viable. He walked fearlessly into every single establishment and faced down every Islamophobic and racist epithet hurled at him, just like Debs did with his working class hands, his secular attitude, and his union card. And yet the traps and the pitfalls ahead of him are many, and we would be wise not to rest all of our expectations squarely on his shoulders. He has a heavy enough lift ahead of him. Conservative pundits are already framing this as a loss for the Democratic Party with the claim that it's giving way to communists. So-called Democratic commentators are claiming his victory speech was too divisive, even after he weathered a torrent of attack ads and hundreds of thousands of coordinated social posts trying to link him to 9/11 when he was 10. Consensus formed broadly on election night that it was nevertheless a victory for Democrats broadly because it was a rebuke of Trump's policies given the plurality of the high-profile results. And yet, where I live, just a few miles from New York City in the increasingly red suburbs of Long Island, the Republicans ran the table. They obliterated the establishment Democratic candidates. Total wipeout. So here's the task. Here's what needs to happen next. We need to build on this zomentum by learning from what's universally appealing about this campaign. Leave New York business now to New York. Support this transition team, being led by the great Lina Khan, by the way, oh my God, and show up for Zohran when he calls upon us to defend him against Trump and the long knives of the party that he now leads in New York, but recognize that just a few miles away, and many miles in all directions of the 5 boroughs, there is work to be done. Zohran Mamdani is a special candidate on his way to becoming a transformational mayor, and the establishment will dust itself off and try to derail his every step. So far, he's had an answer for all of it. Going forward, he'll need us all to stand behind him with outstretched arms like he's preparing for a trust fall. Because invariably, he will falter, he will get knocked down, but we cannot let him fail. But our job beyond this hasn't changed. It's just been validated. See, our job is to keep dragging the Overton window to the left. Public transportation, affordable groceries, affordable housing, childcare, healthcare, basic human needs to provide basic human dignity. Now, we put forward our 5 non-negotiables at the end of 2024 to help start a conversation, and others have put forward some outstanding ideas to coalesce around basic principles. And I've said many times that third parties are structurally incapable of winning federal elections. However, they play a vital role in connecting with local communities. Look at the heroes that Mamdani called out in his victory speech: the DSA, working families, community groups and unions, the taxi drivers that he went on a hunger strike to defend. So connect with the equivalent groups in your area, and if you're in a purple district, build coalitions for the long run. If you're in a deeply blue district and you have a moderate or a conservative Democrat representing you, build a movement to primary them. Time's running out. And keep hammering at affordability. Every movement begins with the pocketbook, because when people are food insecure and living in economic precarity, they will pay attention to whomever pays attention to them. And listen, socialism is not within our grasp. Democratic socialism, like true democratic socialism, is many, many years, maybe decades away. But social democracy, that ever so critical step toward transforming a mature capitalist society that's on the brink of failure, isn't just attainable, it's a moral imperative. And I can count all the ways that it's already too late. And in darker moments, that is where my head goes. But on other days, days like today, when the aura of victory hangs in the air and the light of optimism breaks through the cracks of the windows and the doors, it feels possible. It feels palpable. So despite the long and difficult road ahead, because of this young man, today, I'm choosing to open the doors and the windows and let that light shine in. And I hope you do as well, because we'll need to show strength and unity, not to beat back the Republicans and the billionaires, but to fight against the worst instincts of those who control the levers of the democratic apparatus, who pay lip service to their brothers and sisters in the working class while stabbing them in the back. Ghosts of those who undercut Eugene Debs and sold their souls to protect their share of the crumbs from the capitalist table. And in fact, let's close with Debs in his own words from a labor speech in Pittsburgh, Kansas, 1908. What is it that keeps the working class in subjection? What is it that is responsible for their exploitation and for all of the ills they suffer? Just one thing. It can be stated in a single word: ignorance. The working class have not yet learned how to unite and act together. There are relatively but few capitalists in this country. There are perhaps 20 millions of wage workers, but the capitalists and their retainers have contrived during all these years to keep the working class divided. And as long as the working class is divided, it will be helpless. It's only when the working class learn, and they are learning daily and by bitter experience, to unite and act together, especially on Election Day, that there is any hope for emancipation.
This is the story of a political pundit who looked at the world around him and just said, fuck it. Gives the middle finger to authority and says, kiss my ass. But instead of a revolution, he started a podcast. Just what the world needs. Started a podcast. Another basic white guy who